Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. I'm your host, Brooke Mitchell, and today's webinar is Photo Journal and Aussie Guides Adventures in the American West, presented by pro photographer and NatHab Expedition Leader Matt Cornish. Thank you so much for being here today, Matt. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Brooke, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. It is a very good early morning here in Australia. It's 5 a.m. at the moment. But I wanted to reminisce on a beautiful trip I had just in the last month through the American West. An opportunity that I haven't had in the past, and an opportunity I grabbed with both hands. And I just thought I'd start out with this gorgeous little guy, a little prairie dog. And I just wanted to emphasize before we dive into this webinar, I'm an Australian guide and I get very excited about every single animal that I've never seen before. So some of these animals might be maybe common to some viewers, but for me, it was a mind-blowing experience. This little prairie dog was just the beginning, getting down low, waiting for the perfect moment where he pops his little head up through the burrow and captured this gorgeous shot. Like every podcast, every webinar rather that I go through, I like to introduce myself at the start. I am a photo expedition leader here in Australia. I live in far north Queensland in the rainforest. That's right up the northeastern part of our continent if you haven't been here before. As I mentioned, I'm an Australian expedition leader and photo guide. I'm a naturalist, a photographer, and I've got a few different experiences over my life working with wildlife, from zookeeping to wildlife education to nature photographer, tour guide, and expedition leader with Natural Habitat Adventures. Dedicated most of my life to wildlife. But this particular webinar is all about my travels through the American West. I like to start every photography webinar with this slide, and it's essentially a disclaimer. Wildlife photography is an art, and it's a very personal experience, and it allows photographers to express their passion and love for nature through their images. That is why I am a nature photographer. But I do need to let you know that this webinar is how I personally undertook wildlife photography in the American West. I'll be showcasing some of my techniques and equipment that I use to create the images shown, but this is my subjective view. So you might disagree with some of the ways that I've captured these animals, and that is absolutely amazing. Diversity in opinion is what is so magical about wildlife photography. One animal, plenty of photographers all capturing a different image. Well, as I found out, it's a big country. The US is massive. And it's actually the same size as Australia. A lot of people think that America is bigger than Australia, but geographically it's very, very similar. But when I arrived in the States, I came over to, Natural Habitat Adventures head office. I went over to Denver, explored through Boulder and Colorado. Did this for about a week. My wife then flew into the States. We grabbed ourselves a hire car. I quickly learned how to drive on the other side of the road, and we headed through the beautiful West. Went north through Wyoming, through Casper, went to some very small country town pubs, continued up through Montana, cruised across the top of Yellowstone, explored the northern Yellowstone National Park before heading down the western side of Yellowstone in Idaho. I stayed at Victor for a few days, explored the Grand Tetons, and then I scooted all the way down to Utah, stayed at Salt Lake City, and then quickly checked out Bryce Canyon, the Arches National Park, before making my way back to Colorado. I stayed in a place called Glenwood Springs in Colorado, which was west of Denver in the mountains. Now, I do have one of the greatest wildlife encounters I've ever had in my entire life at the very end of this presentation, and it happened in Glenwood Springs in Colorado. So there's a little teaser for you. When we get to the end, I'll go through that. It wasn't necessarily a photographic opportunity, but an encounter that I will truly never ever forget. It blew my mind. It gives me goosebumps just thinking about it right now. So I guess the first question a lot of photographers have is, well, what camera gear did you take with you? Traveling internationally, for me, I did 3 flights just to get into the States. Flying internationally, we need to be mindful of weight. I am never going to check my camera gear in on an aeroplane. the risk of it being damaged or lost is way too high. So I always carry my camera gear in the airplane with me. I need to make sure it's with me at all times. And with that, some airlines more than others, there is a lot of very, very strict weight regulations. So I try to cut down a little bit of weight here and there. I decide to bring, obviously, my camera. That's a pretty important part, isn't it? I have a Canon R3. It's a mirrorless camera. It is lighter than most DSLR cameras due to the fact that it is mirrorless, but it does have this huge battery extender pack built in at the bottom, which means it does weigh that little bit more. So really, it's about the same weight as my old DSLR camera, but with a lot more specs and a lot more battery strength behind it. Generally speaking, when I'm photographing mammals, which was the main target of this trip, I bring a 70 to 200 mil lens with me. I'm still operating on the EF gear, which is designed for old DSLR, but I do have a converter with me that allows my mirrorless camera to operate with non-mirrorless lenses. So I've got my 70 to 200, my trusty. It's an f2.8. It's image stabilized. It's the second model. It is a very, very efficient and beautiful, clean camera. Has a very, very narrow depth of field and is great with low light, hence the f2.8. Heading to the stunning national parks of the States, I had to bring a wide angle for any landscape opportunities. So I bought this the 17 to 40. Again, it's the EF lens. I use it with a converter. It's f4. And just to get that little bit more reach, this is my cheat way of essentially having a larger telephoto lens. I bring a 1.4 extender. I travel everywhere with my 1.4 extender. If I use that with the 70 to 200 mil lens, it makes it a 280 mil. So it's a pretty decent reach. Ideally, I would have wanted more, but I'll go through some of the takeaways a little bit later on. When I'm in the field, sometimes I capture amazing images that I'm so excited to get on the computer and dive into. So I always bring my MacBook Pro with Lightroom attached all the time when I'm traveling as well. So I guess the first stop, the first real part of the adventure occurred in Yellowstone. Yes, there was amazing landscapes to be seen throughout Wyoming, but it was really just a means to an end. I just wanted to get up to Yellowstone and explore this incredible part of the world for as long as I could. And as soon as I got to this gate, it was like a dream come true. It was truly phenomenal to finally step foot in this incredible location. Now, given the fact that it was towards the end of winter, I was there only a month ago, the northern section was the only thing open. So I had to be mindful of that. But everything that I'd heard from fellow guides and researched online, this was the place to go anyway. The northern section was open between Gardner down to Mammoth, across through Tower Junction to Lamar Valley, and then all the way up through Silvergate to Cook City if I wanted to go that far. I allowed 3 full days of exploring. Realistically, that wasn't enough. After seeing what I saw, I probably needed 6 months, but 3 days was all I had, so that was fine. And as I mentioned earlier, being an Australian, everything was super exciting and very much new to me. So this was the map and the area we explored. We saturated it. We drove it non-stop, chatted to people, kept our eyes open. But also, more importantly, we just stopped and just waited, listened, watched, and allowed these moments to come to us. As I mentioned here, there is still a fair bit of snow around, particularly the northeastern area. Through Gardner to Mammoth, there wasn't too much snow, but as we continued east, the snow got thicker and thicker. All the way up to that northeastern gate, it was particularly snowy, and there wasn't too much wildlife interaction to be had there. So the wildlife encounters that I had in Yellowstone, we'll dive straight into it. I saw bison. As you'd expect, there was plenty of bison, coyotes, which was amazing. Oh, but also there was one newborn bison, which was unbelievable, and it ties really well in with the coyotes, which we'll talk about a little bit later. I was fortunate enough to see a black bear in a den with two young coming in and out of the den, which was, again, absolutely incredible. I saw a grizzly bear with young up in a mountain. with a spotting scope, very far away, but just the sighting alone was mind-blowing again. A great horned owl. I was just chatting to Brooke just before this webinar about this encounter. No, it was actually on my accommodation veranda, on the deck, on the patio, in the morning, calling for a mate. Mind blowing again, just incredible. I saw red fox, moose, a bald and golden eagles. A bald eagle actually feeding on a frozen bison corpse, which is like straight out of a documentary. Saw pronghorn, mule deer, elk, and many other animals as well. So in 3 days, I felt like I just walked straight through a David Attenborough documentary. There was wildlife everywhere, and oh, it was a trip of a lifetime. It really was. But it's a photo journal webinar, so let's dive into some of the photos. Guys, we are going to dive into some of the specs of the images, how we captured the image, and also some of the editing techniques. And I'll even provide you with some before and after of how I edited the images as well. Image number 1, coyote stalking baby bison. Now, as I mentioned, the baby bison and the coyote, they blend in pretty well. So I'm driving along in Yellowstone. I'm no more than maybe half an hour into the journey. And I see a crowd of people, and I've been told if you see a crowd of people in Yellowstone, you stop and see what's going on. Well, what was going on was there was a bunch of bison and there was a newborn. And honestly, it would have been the last 24 hours this thing was born. It couldn't even move. It was just laying still on the ground and being guarded by all the adults. Of course, no doubt the smell of this attracted coyotes. There was 4 coyotes all stalking this baby bison on a beautiful snowy plateau. So I got the camera, the R3 70 to 200, put the 1.4 extender. So again, I'm shooting at 280 mils maximum distance. I used a shutter of 1/800, aperture f4, because the extender brings that aperture up a little bit. And I used an ISO of 320. What I really enjoyed was, and this was new to me, I've never photographed wildlife in the snow. Where I live, sorry, it never snows, so we don't have these opportunities. But I did realize it's essentially a huge light box. When you're photographing wildlife in snow, the light rebounds in all directions and creates this beautiful filling light. Not too many harsh shadows, which was great. Oh, love that image. Editing the post shoot, though, I had to clean up the surrounds a little bit, increase the clarity and contrast and detail. I will show you that a little bit later. But also, you had to make sure the animal was isolated away from background distractions. Capturing the animal in snow, I felt like there was a beautiful feel of infiniteness. It was emptiness. And that's what's so magic about these images, is capturing an animal just walking through the vastness of nothing. So this is the before and after of the shots. So this is before and after editing. And you can see here that there was a lot of distraction on the left-hand side, and I had to isolate the coyote a little bit better. So the way I did was I used some masking tools. I dragged a mask. If you're into Lightroom, you might understand what I'm talking about. Essentially, I highlighted the top part of the image where this background distraction was, and I overexposed it, creating into a whiteness. I also captured and highlighted with the masking tool some of these little bit of patchy snow material on the left-hand side of the image. Isolate that, overexposed into whiteness, and then I grabbed the subject itself, increased the clarity, the contrast, and tried to bring out some of that beautiful color and detail of the coyote, just as I was seeing it in the flesh through binoculars. And the end result, I was pretty happy with it. Still got this beautiful branch in front of the foot. The look, it almost looks like that coyote knows exactly what I'm doing. He said, hey, you're here to capture an image. I'm here to capture a baby bison. Let's just keep our distance from each other and respect, and we can both have a win today. When I was there, that baby bison did not get grabbed. The adult bison were pretty onto these coyotes and their cunning plans. Alrighty, the next shot that I captured was a big target of mine. I really wanted to photograph a bison in the snow. Same photographic equipment, but all of a sudden we're dealing with a much bigger animal. So I didn't need the 1.4 extender. And this image right here was captured from a vehicle, so I was able to keep a safe distance. I was on the roadway to pull off lane. This bison was just standing in the snow. Used the 70 to 200 mil lens. This, without the extender, allowed me to lower my aperture down to 2.8. I used a shutter of 1,250. I wanted to make sure, because I was in a vehicle, engine running, I wanted to make sure that I was shooting fast enough that the subtle movement of the engine of the car didn't blur the image. I used an ISO of 500 as well. It was a sunny day. The snow was reflecting and filling in the beautiful details of the bison. Obviously, great lighting. But I did realize in these snowy days, the moisture in the air can create a very hazy image. And this is something I needed to address post shoot when I was editing. I need to remove a lot of the haze. I'll show you some before and after editing shots very shortly. But again, we had to clean up the surrounds, increase the clarity and contrast of the subject, and make sure that animal was isolated from background distractions again. I really enjoy this image for the vegetation. When I photograph wildlife, I like the animal to look through the image. I like to have space in front of the animal. I try to capture a little bit more of the surrounds to add to the feature and the story of the image. So by having this vegetation here and the white space in front of the bison, I think painted that portrait really nicely. So shockingly, this is the before and after. I did have to spend a little bit of work on this. I saw the image in my head that I wanted to capture. I saw the moment, but I did have to create some work. When I was photographing the animal, I made sure there was a separation between the subject and the background. You can see on the hump of the bison, there's a very thin slither of snow. I needed to make sure that was separated. So when I was post editing, I could select all that background and remove it. So overexpose it into white nothingness that is the snow. So by creating that little gap, it did make my editing process easier, and I was able to do that quite effectively. Once I removed all that background distraction, I then captured the animal and then started bringing out those natural colors. Bringing out some of the clarity, the contrast was really important without overdoing it, and also bringing out the warmth. My camera, I did have it on auto white balance. There was a lot of different colors in the field, so I kept on auto white balance. And I felt like the image on the left-hand side was a little bit cooler in color, so a little bit more of a bluey purple tinge. Whereas the image on the right, after I edited it, is a little bit warmer and brings out those beautiful natural orange brown colors of the bison. So I did have to regulate the temperature of the image just a little bit in post-shoot. I've also got a screenshot of some of the editing. Again, this is probably not really important for too many people, but for those that are interested, I thought I'd put it up here. On the left-hand side, I've actually got some of the settings of the bison. So when I put a mask on the subject, increase the contrast, increase the shadows, and also just increase the strength of the blacks a little bit. And as I mentioned, you can see the color, temperature, just drag that temperature scale up a little bit. That was just the bison. It's really important if you're going to move the temperature gauge, you don't capture the snow as well. Otherwise, the snow will look yellow. And we don't like yellow snow. I don't need to go there. The next image in the middle here talks about the clarity and the contrast. I've increased the clarity scale and the dehaze of the bison only. And also you can see down the bottom the sharpness, just lifted it a little bit, and then obviously brought out the detail of the bison. The image on the right-hand side here was of the mask of how to remove the background. So I actually dragged down and just selected the top part, and I removed the bison from that mask. So I selected uh, subtract, select subject, and then I just grabbed that little part of distraction in the background and put exposure all the way to the end, which just blew it out into pure white. Again, if you don't understand this, that's perfectly fine. This is diving pretty deep into editing. But if there is any people watching out there that might benefit from this, that's why I wanted to go through it. The end product is probably my favorite image that I captured from the entire trip. An absolutely glorious animal in the vastness of snow, And also the vegetation is just so raw and real and so rugged. It shows a lot of survivability of the whole image. Next image I want to dive into is a pronghorn. So these guys are pretty much all over Yellowstone when I was there, but it was a very, very challenging image to capture, and I'm not overly happy with this. I found the background of this image too distracting, but again, I'm going to put up images that I captured, and even if I'm not truly happy with the end product. With wildlife, obviously, we need to respect wildlife. We need to make sure that our presence is not disrupting wildlife. And as you can see here, I'm very, very low down capturing this animal. So people might think that I walked up and laid down in front of it, but that is not the case. I actually photographed this animal from the roadside and I was standing upright. The reason why is this pronghorn was with a group of other pronghorn on a ledge. So they're up a little bit higher. On a side of the road, there was a mounted bit of landscape, and these guys were all feeding there. So I could stand there, and I was eye level with their feet. I thought this was a great photographic opportunity. I kept a great deal of distance to ensure that I didn't disrupt their behavior. Obviously, because I didn't want to get too close, I used the 1.4 extender and I wanted to capture it as fast as I could, just in case these guys are on the move. I wanted to capture motion. Shutter, I did 1/2000, just in case they did move because they were feeding and turning their heads. F4, which is as low as I could go with the extender on, and ISO 500 to increase that shutter speed. As I mentioned here, I managed to find a location where the subject was on a rise, so I didn't have to compromise myself by getting down nice and low. I tried to give the image some depth through editing. I tried to use masks. I did find the original image too flat, but I did struggle, and I'm not overly happy with the end result because the background colors are the exact same as the animal. And surprise, surprise, this is Darwin's theory of evolution. It is a fantastic camouflage. When you look at it, the patterning literally resembles the landscape and patches of snow, which I thought was epic. This is the before and this is the after. You can see the image on the left is a little bit flat. What I did was I actually used a mask on the left-hand side, dragged it across and made it a little bit darker. And then on the right-hand side of the image, I created a mask, dragged it across towards the pronghorn's head, and lightened it a little bit. So I've made one side of the image a little bit darker, the other side of the image a little bit brighter. And what this resembles is sunlight, trying to add that depth into the image by manipulating light. That's what I've tried to create here. The end result, you can see. It's really important if you're going to use this technique of masking to increase the depth through light, you must always respect the natural light that's on the image. You can see this pronghorn has sun shining on its head and also its back. I would not darken those areas. I would enhance it and show that that's where the light is moving on to. Only darken areas that are already darkened and brighten the areas that are already bright. If you fight against that natural light flow, it will be very, very difficult to maintain a quality image. But you cannot capture them all. And this was a lesson that, I've tried to take with me in all of my travels. Sometimes there are amazing photographic opportunities, don't get me wrong, but sometimes it's nice to just take a photo on your phone and enjoy the experience. My wife is not a photographer and she is always nagging me, Matt, put the camera down and just enjoy the experience. And this is something I've had to learn over the years, I must admit. But these days, I like to capture an image when the opportunity presents itself and I can see potential in the subject. And then there's moments where I just like to look at animals and say, yes, how good is this? And this was just some of the moments that I had, some of my favorite visual moments that I captured on mobile phones. Obviously, we got an elk in someone's yard, which I thought was insane. Obviously, being an Australian, I get very excited about this stuff. I got a red fox in the snow, which stood out amazingly and beautiful. It was actually hanging around another deceased bison while coyotes were feeding on it. I think the red fox was quite low in the ranking system. The bottom left image I took through a scope, and that is a bald eagle, obviously standing right next to a frozen bison carcass and feeding on it. Truly iconic. And then obviously some female bighorn sheep here, which were just chilling out next to the side of the road, which was which was quite phenomenal as well. But we must continue. We must continue our journey. So after 3 full days of Yellowstone and jalapeno cornbread, oof, that stuff is amazing. It was time to continue on down to Idaho. I stayed in Victor in Idaho and accessed the Tetons through there. It was about 45 minutes just to get to Jackson from my accommodation, but it was worth it. And the drive was unbelievably scenic. Found a beautiful cabin in Victor and allowed me to feel a little bit isolated away from the masses of people that might be congregating around Jackson and Tetons. So having that isolation and the scenic driving, I thought was a perfect way of doing it. So this is a map of Tetons that I found online. However, I did go at the wrong time of year to access a lot of these points. I had some amazing intel from local guides, from NatHab, and done a lot of research online and realized that Jenny Lake would have been a great spot to go to. Some of the beautiful trails through Lee Lake, Jackson Lake, and surrounds. When I got there, I realized that there was snow everywhere and all of these lakes were frozen. So a lot of those plans went out the door. I had 3 full days of exploring. So I came up with one mission and one mission only, and that was to photograph a moose. But also, these incredible landscapes were begging to have their photo taken. So I certainly dived into some landscape photography while I was there as well. Of course, mission accomplished. We got a moose. Uh, for this particular image, I got pretty lucky. Well, firstly, it's a tough time of year to photograph moose. As I found out, it was the time of year where moose did not have antlers, and also they were going through a coat change, so they looked really scraggly and not overly photogenic. Beautiful, not overly photogenic. So I needed to capture a portrait. I really wanted to decide on getting a gorgeous view of the head and the features of the face was probably going to be the way to go. Had the Canon R3, obviously, 70 to 200mm lens. The 1.4 extender is getting used a lot now, but this was early morning. I was out very, very early. In fact, I was out before sunrise to photograph the Tetons, and I'll show you those images later. But while I was out there early morning, the sunrise, I got my shots, I'm driving back, and there is a moose standing on the side of the road at a car parking, like a pull-off lane. But you have got to be kidding. This moose is just presenting itself to me. So I've pulled over, quite a fair few feet or meters away from it. That's why I've got the extender on. But the sun was pouring in behind. This animal was so heavily backlit, I couldn't see any details. What I need to do was I need to lower my shutter speed, overexpose the subject to bring out those details, so therefore I can recover it through post edit. By doing so, the image was very bright, it was very hazy, it was really, really difficult to work with. But I will show you the before and after very shortly. I did my best in the camera to capture the moment, but I did have to adjust some things afterwards. Alrighty, let's have a look at it. This is it. You can already see on the left-hand side, that is a very, very cold morning. It is, again, the white balance of my camera captured the true colors. Very, very cold and blue, very hazy and misty. So on the right-hand side, the after, obviously I've warmed the image up, but I've selected the color orange and I made it a little bit rosy. I felt like just adjusting those colors away from a very strong orange, brought out a little bit more of a softer reddish orange color, which represented what I thought I was seeing it with my true eyes. And I was obviously able to, by overexposing originally, bring out the details of the facial features of the moose. I did capture some full body shots as well, but this scraggly coat change business was not overly appealing to the viewer. So we do have a little bit of it present on the neck and coming down through the shoulders, but I really just wanted to focus on the face. And the end product, I think, is pretty crispy. You can see by lowering that shutter speed, but also maintaining the stability of the camera, we're able to bring out the details and have a very, very sharp image. I had to turn my car off for this one. Even the smallest movements of the engine was too much. Alrighty, I did promise you some landscapes of the Tetons. Well, here's one of them. I did have a wide angle lens with me. but I decided to use my telephoto lens to capture some landscapes. So I've got the Canon R3, I've got the 70 to 200. This was in the middle of the day, this particular shot. I'll show you the early morning one very shortly, but this particular one was the middle of the day. Very harsh light, but also quite intimidating cloud systems coming over. So I shot very, very fast. Increased the shutter speed up to 1/5000th of a second. Very, very quick because this snow was just rebounding light. It was very contrasted, very intense. And by shooting very quickly, I was able to create a bit more of a moody photo. Now, I did mention that I shot it with a telephoto lens. What I did was I turned my camera into a portrait orientation and I took multiple shots along the mountain range from left to right. And then I stitched them together in Lightroom as a panorama. The reason I chose that over a wide angle is by using the telephoto, multiple images, stitching them together, you get a lot more fine detail. The image file is massive, don't get me wrong. But if this image was to be printed, this could be comfortably on a billboard, and you'll be able to see every individual tree that's sitting on that mountain. It is very, very high quality. If I shot it with a wide angle lens, I wouldn't have any of the real strong detail. So I opted, thinking the potential of having this image expanded one day, telephoto lens, portrait orientation, from left to right, multiple images, nice and slowly. And this is what we ended up with. I wanted that moody element to it. Through editing, I increased the contrast on the clouds to bring over the intimidation of the weather system. But also, I think by lowering the saturation, lowering the colors of this foreground and also the trees, and turning any form of greenery into a grey black, it increased the mood of the mountains. And I think it worked out quite well. But this is the sunrise shot. Yes, I wanted to have that real moody black and white style image, but I also wanted to capture this beautiful colors of the sunrise. So I went back there. In Celsius, it was -7 degrees. My Fahrenheit conversion is terrible, so I can't tell you how cold it was. But it was so cold, I couldn't feel my hands and I couldn't feel my feet. I had very, very thick merino wool socks on and boots, and I had undergarments, I had long pants on, I had a shirt, I had a jacket, I had two other big jackets on top, I had a beanie and gloves. Oh my goodness, it was the coldest I've ever been in my entire life. And the wind chill was absolutely shocking. I got out there, determined to get the shot. Again, telephoto lens, portrait orientation from left all the way through to right. I did lower my shutter speed this time. I didn't need it to be so fast because the light was so soft and beautiful. Capture these beautiful purple colors. I have barely touched this image in post edit. Other than stitching it together, the light is true, the colors are true. Aperture 4.5, I just increased it that little bit because I wanted to get the depth of the image. ISO 640 to allow the shutter speed to get up that little bit higher. Because I was shooting handheld, I did need to make sure I was very, very stable within myself. I did ask my wife for assistance. She was in the car with the heater on. She was not getting out. We live in a very warm tropical environment, so we don't cope with the cold too well, as you could probably figure by now. But just like that, it was time to head off to the next state, the national parks of Utah. Now, I must admit, when I went to Utah, I had spent a week and a half photographing wildlife, being immersed with it. I was pretty excited to see some beautiful landscapes, and really, I wasn't too pressured to capture these landscapes. I just wanted to immerse myself. And as an Australian going to some of these national parks, I felt like Wile E. Coyote should be chasing Roadrunner around these landscapes. It was so iconic to see and be part of this stunning colors in the middle of such a dry and harsh environment. But I must say, I was snowed on in what I would have thought was, well, a desert country. It was pretty bizarre. Red rock and snow is just, yeah, it's crazy. Alrighty, One of the first stops I went to was obviously Salt Lake City. I then headed down to Bryce Canyon. Quite the drive, but it was worth it. Bryce Canyon was pretty busy. It was peak hour. It was a weekend. There was a lot of people around. In fact, you had to catch a shuttle bus into the park. So I thought, right, I'm not going to try and capture the canyon. There's so many different iconic spots. What I want to do is I want to look for something unique. I saw this tree at one of the lookouts, and I thought, that tree has seen some things. That tree is a survivor. I thought having that shallow root system, the really heavily weathered bark, the broken branches, it's pretty much a symbolism of hardship and survivalism. So I thought, yes, I'm going to capture this for sure. I put the wide angle on for the first time of the whole trip, the 17 to 40 mil. It was a very bright day, so I used a shutter of 1000. Need to make sure that I didn't get too much influx of bright light. Put my aperture at f9. The reason I increased my aperture so much, I wanted to have a stronger depth of field because I had this beautiful storm system behind us, as you can see. And I thought that added an element of hardship to the image. Tough, unforgiving ground, beautiful big storm coming through, orange colors. Let's do it. Used ISO 800 to achieve that lighting. Now, as I said, just like the Tetons, I used a fast shutter speed to create that moody image, increase the f-stop to increase that depth of field. I lowered myself down, bringing the lens as wide as I could. So I shot this at 17 mil, so as wide as I possibly could on the lens, because I really wanted to incorporate and feature that root system. The tree was one thing, the root system was another. And as you can see, I think it creates a lot of feel for the image. Oh, while I was out in the field, I saw this little guy as well. I am seeking an identity on this quick little reptile here, this little lizard that was scampering across the rocks. He was quite small, and also he was on these huge big boulders. So I thought by capturing this image and isolating him as a small component of the image, it will show that he's quite separated from the landscape, and also it shows that he is quite small. And I can confirm, I think I've got an identity for this guy. It looks like it's a plateau fence lizard. Plateau fence lizard. And that is courtesy of our photography director, Mike Hillman, for that identity. So thank you very much, Mike. What a gorgeous little guy. Alrighty. What I learned and what would I do differently? So obviously, having never been over there before and just doing some research online, it truly was difficult. Not having the ability to bring bigger equipment with me was a challenge. If I was to go back, I would probably rent or purchase a longer telephoto lens. When I say purchase, I would probably purchase it in the States and maybe leave it with someone to sell if I had that ability. Obviously, if you live in the States, that's probably not going to be a huge challenge. But certainly a 600 mil lens or similar would be ideal for Yellowstone. A lot of different camera companies have, 200 to 600 mil lenses or 300 to 600 or similar. That's probably what I would have used. Having that bit more reach would have opened up the ability to capture more animals. You can see I've got some images, but not a huge number of them. And I took the opportunities when I could get them. And I think the biggest restriction for me was the lack of reach on my lens. Like all wildlife, magic happens early and late. Getting out into the parks before sunrise and staying there until sunset was the key. Now, this was dangerous when it came to driving. You had to go very slowly and be mindful of wildlife, obviously. But I did find that the wildlife encounters were a lot better early morning and late afternoon. And the lighting was obviously perfect as well. One of the lessons I did learn was stop and just wait. Even if there's no wildlife, just stop and wait. There was one point that we pulled up and just sat there. My wife and I just looked at the landscape of the mountains of Yellowstone and just thought, wow, can you believe we are here right now? And just having that moment of appreciation, the moment of mindfulness, and just soak it up and just be at one, I thought was really special. And while we were there, we could hear wolves howling in the distance. So that was pretty magical for me as well. Watching incredible wildlife is the goal. Capturing a stunning image is only a bonus. Okay? And that's something that I've been trying to teach myself for a long time. The image is a bonus. Watching the wildlife undertake its natural behavior truly is the goal that you want to be achieving. And like everywhere I've ever been, stay longer. I absolutely fell in love with the States. And I will be back. I am currently booking my next trip. I'm going to head up to Alaska to see some grizzlies. But this part of the world, America, was just absolutely incredible. And my heart, as part of it, is still there, not at the pubs, at the national parks. And I cannot wait to head back to some of these areas again one day. Now, I did promise you my favorite wildlife encounter of the trip. And please bear with me. I did capture this image on my mobile phone, and it is very blurry and it is dark, and it's an absolutely awful image, but it holds a very special place in my heart. So I'm in Glenwood Springs, staying in my cabin in Colorado. And again, I'm an Australian, get excited about American wildlife, and I'm laying there, and there's a window next to my bed, and I hear scratching. And I thought, oh, please, if this scratching is a raccoon, I'm going to be so excited to see a raccoon. Like, oh man, all I've got to do is sit up, look out the window. I'm going to see a raccoon. This is so good. I sat up, looked out the window, and it was a black bear standing on its back feet, front paws against my window, looking into the cabin. It wasn't a raccoon, it was a black bear. And this thing was about 6 foot tall and massive. Doesn't look very big here in the image, but it was huge. I looked at my wife and said, Jodie, there is a bear outside our window. And a few other words that I won't say right here. She jumped up and we saw this huge bear move down onto all fours and just walk off into the bush. This was my last morning before I left America. And I feel like it was the greatest farewell gift I could ever have imagined. And again, it is one of the greatest wildlife encounters I've ever had. And to highlight, it's not a photographic opportunity. It's just a moment in time that will be remembered and cherished forever. And I think that's what's so important about travel, is being at one with the moments, not necessarily chasing the images. So with that, also I must also say your magpies, don't tell any Australians, but your magpies are better looking than ours. I think ours have a better song. The Australian magpie's got a beautiful song, but your magpies, this black-billed magpie, was stunning. They're vibrant blue, incredible. But guys, I just wanted to open the room. For anyone out there, photographers, wildlife enthusiasts, if you have any questions at all, it can be technical, it can be basic, please, now is your opportunity to ask them. And we've got a little bit of time.
Oh my goodness, Matt, that was so entertaining. I was laughing at you so many times when you were describing how cold you were and all of your layers. And then, of course, your excitement over a raccoon. That was so much fun. Thank you for taking us through your wonderful trip through the Americas and reminding us why that we do have such great wildlife here. So thanks for that. That was a wonderful presentation. So as Matt said, everybody, we do have some time for some Q&A here. We have a little bit of a quiet audience. So everybody, if you think anything at all, as you can tell, Matt is a very, very open person, and I will be happy to send his question through over to him. I will let you know, Matt, that we do have a comment here that the RF 100 to 500 is a really, really great lens. So
Mm.
I don't know if you've looked into that one before, but we have some a personal, yeah, just note there
Totally.
about
The
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 lens.
what the 100 to 500 is amazing. I have used it in the field. I've borrowed it off some people. But I must say, Canon is looking at bringing out a either 200 to 600 or 300 to 600 RF, and I am holding on to
Oh.
my pennies as tight as I can, waiting for that lens. So, uh, yes, the 100 to 500 is amazing. When you zoom out to 500, I think it's a 7.1 f-stop, which isn't very good in low light. For me, generally
Hmm.
speaking, I photograph a lot of wildlife in low light, so that is a big contributing factor to me. So I'm holding my pennies, waiting for the perfect lens. But yes, I have used that lens. It is incredible. but I am waiting for the rainbow, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow as it arrives, which will be that new lens.
Yes, that's a really, really good point. Yes, I also have a Canon mirrorless, so that is really good to know. Yes, with you in that rainforest, I think I can hear the rain on your car because you actually had to leave your rainforest home to come present to
Yes.
us.
Absolutely. And I must admit, during this webinar, I was putting the windows up because it started to rain quite heavily and I was getting wet. But yes, I live in a tiny home in a rainforest. I have to drive into town because I have no internet at home, and I sit in the car in the rain to present. But also while we are waiting for any questions to come through, this image that's on our screen right now, this black-billed magpie. Uh, I mean, I didn't go into the photographic specs of this particular shot, but I must say, capturing an animal that is black and white is literally borderline impossible. To get the features and the detail of the white and the features and the detail of the black on the same image is very, very difficult. I was super lucky with this shot. I wanted to photograph these guys since I was in Denver. And yes, I got excited about squirrels and magpies. I was walking around in a park in Denver looking for squirrels and magpies. Most people thought I was a lunatic, but no, I'm just Australian. When I saw this guy in Yellowstone, he was sitting on this rocky boulder that you can see under his feet, literally right next to the car when I parked up. I thought, you are kidding me. And it was so overcast that the light was even. All I had to do was make sure that my settings, my shutter speed was just perfect even light, and that way I could capture the detail from the black and the detail from the white. If I overexposed it, I would have lost the detail in the white. If I underexposed it, I would have lost the detail in the black. So it's a very, very delicate seesaw balance when you capture an animal that is black and white like this guy.
And I completely understand. Yes, I love watching the magpies. Having lived really close to Rocky Mountain National Park for years, they are very entertaining birds and have a lot of personality. So I understand why you got very excited about this bird. We do have a good question here, so I'm going to go ahead and ask you this, Matt. So, what is your process about selecting images, and how much time do you usually spend on editing?
Oh man, how much time do I spend on editing?
Right.
Realistically, way too much time. Enough time that my wife says, "All right, that's enough." When because I use a mirrorless R3 and I'm shooting wildlife, I generally shoot on very, very fast amount of images. So it's burst mode. So you're shooting as soon as I press the shutter, I've taken like 3 shots straight away. If I hold the shutter down, I can take hundreds of images endlessly. And this is really, really handy, particularly with wildlife when it's moving, capturing that moment and making sure you've got a crisp image. With that, though, when it comes to editing, there is a lot of images to go through. You will have noticed that I said I took my MacBook Pro on trip with me with Lightroom. Generally, what I will do is I will look on the camera. If it's a dud image, I'll delete it on the camera. If it's hard to tell on the camera, I'll upload them all onto my computer and then I triage them. I go through and select the sharpest and most suitable image that I think is beautifully composed, beautifully framed, good lighting, and good potential. If I edit it, I can clean it up and make it a nice image at the end. So that does take a long time. But what I try and do is once it's on my computer, I just find times when there's not much to do. And when it comes to international travel, sitting in an airport for 4 hours is the perfect time to do it. So I try to get my images on the computer and I make time when it's available to me. Another good example would be, we're sitting down maybe in a park and we're relaxed, we're comfortable. I think this beautiful surrounds. I might get the laptop out and do half an hour while I'm chatting away to the wife or whatever. So I try to make time where I can, but in just my entire life, I spent a lot of time editing images. It is, some people say it's the downside to photography, downside of taking so many shots, but also it is the process to create magic. And that's my passion, that's my life, it's my livelihood. So, yeah, I do enjoy the process.
Great, because it's never ending. I'm glad you enjoy the process.
I enjoy the result.
Right. Yeah. Oh, this is a fun one. Did you have one favorite or multiple favorite sites at each of the parks you visited?
Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to quickly shoot through this because there's one moment that I had in Yellowstone, which I thought was just the best. This one. This is down in Lamar Valley. And to give you an idea, I have been researching this trip for about 8 months. The reason I went to these places to start with is, well, I travel with NatHab guests all the time. I'm running tours throughout Australia, Southern Australia, the ultimate Australia. In fact, we are starting photography tours next year, so I'll be able to meet more photographer-based guests. But I was running this tour in Southern Australia. I was in Victoria on the Great Ocean Road, part of our Southern itinerary. And NatHab has essentially contacted me, said, please come over for guide training. We're going to do a workshop for a week. And I just said to my guests, hey guys, I'm heading over to the States. Do you have any recommendations? I'd love to bring my wife over and do 2 weeks. And a lot of my guests said, you've got to go to Yellowstone, you've got to go to Tetons. And then just by meeting guests over the next 6 months or so, I changed that up and fine detailed it just by chatting to the locals because that's what you do. But when I found out I was going to go to Yellowstone, I was told that the northern section is the only part that'll be open. And all I've heard is Lamar Valley is the Serengeti of America. So when I got out there, I'm thinking, I am going to make an admission here that some people might find embarrassing, but I'm not. I don't care. I'll embrace it. I went on Google Maps and I put that little walking man on Lamar Valley, and I walked up and down Lamar Valley on my computer for a long time before I went there. I knew every single corner of that place before I arrived. And when I got there, it was like a dream come true. And to have a bison standing in this vast snow, it truly just filled my soul. My bucket was overflowing with joy. So for me, Lamar Valley will always hold a special spot in my heart. Now for Tetons, it is a tough one because there was a lot of limited access. But I'm just going to quickly shoot through some images here. Oh, too many. There we go. This image, the sunrise with my fingers falling off, this was a pretty magical experience as well. That mountain range is so truly iconic and stunning. I've never seen mountains like that before. Again, I live in a rainforest, which is gorgeous, don't get me wrong, but to see the harshness, the snow, there's glaciers up there, like it was just unbelievable. The wispy clouds, the purple light, the fingers falling off. I'm not sure if I've mentioned that yet. Just that moment in itself, the location, again, I'll never forget that. It was truly incredible. And Utah, this spot right here. Uh, this was not a planned photo. Uh, Obviously, Arches National Park. Wow. Moab. Wow. I will 100% be back there. Everywhere you look is just stunning landscapes. Uh, and there was a couple of different walks available. It was very, very hot. It was the middle of the day. So my wife and I went up to a lookout where we could see Delicate Arch. You can see it up there on the left-hand side. But I approached it from a different side. There was hundreds of people at Delicate Arch. In fact, on the image, you can see little dots there. Uh, I wanted to go to a different spot where I could see this beautiful valley. I could see the arch, but also just have a moment of solitude. So my wife and I went out to this spot and we sat near this ledge. We weren't on the ledge. The image is a little bit misleading. But we just soaked up this landscape for probably about half an hour. And again, that was so memorable for me. I took this image just when we're about to leave because I was just watching it, observing it, enjoying it for what it was. And I think that in itself will hold a very, very special spot in my heart as well. So Arches National Park, if you haven't been there, is absolutely picturesque and your eyeballs will get a good workout. Everywhere you look is just stunning. So yeah, that is the answer to that question.
Yeah, I could not agree. I've had the opportunity to visit Arches in multiple different seasons. I've even camped there. Do not recommend camping at
Oh,
the height of season because it's really hot. Made that mistake, but it's beautiful all the same. So
yeah,
that's great.
yeah.
Great. The last question here, did you see any wolves when you were in the Lamar Valley?
Mm. No, I didn't. And that's the short answer, but I will go into the long answer. When I was in Yellowstone, um, There was obviously a lot of wolf watchers, and I've been told, you approach them, have a chat to them, see what they're looking at. Um, I did not have a scope with me. Again, limited resources, international travel. I decided not to bring my scope, which means I would have to rely on other people if the wolves were far away. For me, I was more immersed in every animal I could see. I wasn't too concerned about not seeing wolves. Uh, Again, being an Australian, I was impressed by a magpie. So I was just happy to soak up every wildlife opportunity I had. I didn't go there with a checklist. I know a lot of travelers have, bucket list items, but sometimes it sets you up for disappointment. For me, I just like to travel and embrace whatever happens and whatever moments present themselves. And that's where the magic lies. And with that, I was fortunate enough to use someone else's scope and see, a grizzly bear and cub. They'd pretty much just emerged out of a den and were rolling around in the snow in a mountain. I was also able to see black bear with two cubs emerging as well. And these were moments that I certainly didn't plan for, expect. They just happened. Wolf encounters, they did not just happen. If I had a scope and I was more dedicated, I probably would have seen them, but maybe at the detriment of some of the other wildlife encounters and some of the things that I also saw there. I did see a lot of wolf watchers, but I also gave them the distance and didn't sit there begging to look at a wolf. I thought I would just continue, give them the space, and enjoy whatever moments present themselves to me.
Wonderful. Yeah. Bear emergence. That is such a special sighting as somebody who travels the world to see carnivores myself. That is quite amazing that you got two. So, wow. Talk about being at the right place at the right time.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, that is the last question that we will take for the day. So, Matt, I'll turn it to you for any last closing comments.
Well, I mean, most of our viewers, our watchers, are probably from the States, and I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for providing me with one of the most memorable trips I could ever have expected. I When I travel, I've traveled to some amazing places around the world, South America, Africa, all through Asia and Australia, and I didn't really know what to expect with America. Obviously, there's a few different, social adjustments to take place, and a few different concerns of international travelers when they go abroad. So I didn't really know what to expect. And when I arrived, the beautiful greetings, the warm welcomes I received from everyone I met was just amazing. And then when I hit the road and started meeting characters along the way, seeing these landscapes, seeing the wildlife, eating amazing food, it was honestly one of the best trips I have ever done in my life. So, for the people of USA, I want to end this podcast by saying thank you. Thank you for having such an incredible country and gifting me the opportunity to explore it.
Well, thank you, Matt, for reminding us that our country is so beautiful for those of us who are here and then everybody else tuning in from around the world. Just come and see us too. It is such a beautiful, diverse country. So thank you, Matt. And I'd like to thank everybody who tuned in. Join us tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation and we will have the replay available on our website soon. And remember, if you're part of a photo club and would like a NatHab photo guide to speak to your members about nature and travel photography, please email us at webinars@nathab.com. And with that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.